Imagine waking up one morning in your home. Your family has lived there for generations. Your grandparents are buried nearby. Your memories are tied to everything around you. Then, a man who you've never met draws a line on a map, and suddenly, your home is no longer your country. You become a minority overnight. You have days and barely hours to decide which side of the border will you be. Do you stay or do you leave everything behind? In 1947, this happened to millions of people. And the man responsible for drawing the line on a map had never visited India before. His name was Sir Cyril Radcliffe. This is the story of one man who drew a line that changed lives of million people forever. Now, let's go back to July 1947. The British rule in India is ending. The decision to create India and Pakistan has been made. But there is one enormous problem. Where will that border be? Punjab and Bengal were home to millions of Hindu, Sikh, Muslim, and Christians, and others living side by side. Cities, villages, rivers, farms, markets, and entire communities intertwined. And so, drawing a border isn't as simple as drawing a line on a map. Every mark affects people, real homes, real lives. And so, who does the British choose for this task? A lawyer from England called Cyril Radcliffe. Not a historian, not a geographer, and not someone who understood the region. A man who had never been to India before and had no experience of drawing borders. And then came the next unbelievable part. He was just given over 5 weeks to complete the job. 5 weeks to decide the future of millions. Think about that for a moment. Many of us spend longer than 5 weeks to understand which university should we go to, which country should we move to. And Radcliffe had only 5 weeks to divide entire provinces, to determine which villages will go in India and which in Pakistan. Which families would wake up on one side of the border. He worked with maps, consensus numbers, statistics, administrative records, reports from political leaders. But maps don't show memories, statistics don't show friendships, numbers don't show childhood homes. A map can tell you how many people live somewhere, but it cannot tell you how many generations have called that place home. Imagine looking at Lahore or Amritsar. On paper, there are just points on a map, but for people living there, they are entire worlds that their lives revolve around. And somehow, those worlds had to be divided. One of the most tragic parts about this story is that people did not know where the border will be and on which side will they end up on. Families did celebrate independence. Flags were raised. Speeches were also delivered. But the final boundary itself wasn't even public after the independence. Imagine that uncertainty. You don't know whether you will be in India or Pakistan. You don't know whether your relatives, friends, or childhood partners will end up on which side of the border, with you or without you. You don't know whether you will need to leave, run, or stay where you are. People waited, hoped, and prayed. Then the maps arrived and everything changed like this. The sad part is, history often remembers lines, dates, leaders. But partition wasn't experienced as just a line on the border. It was experienced as loss, pain, suffering. A father locking his front door for the last time. A mother carrying photographs. A child asking when will they get to return back home. An elderly grandparent refusing to leave. For some families, the border passed through their district. For others, through their memories. The Radcliffe Line affected roughly 88 million people and contributed to one of the largest human migrations in history. Millions crossed the newly created border hoping to reach somewhere safe where they can fit in. But behind every statistic was a name, a family, a story. Many people left carrying what they could hold. Some believed they would return in a few weeks, others locked their doors and kept the keys, not knowing when they could come back and see these homes again. And perhaps this is what makes partition even more emotional, even today, not because of politics, but because every family has an untold story. A grandmother, a neighbor, an uncle, a friend, someone who lost a place that they can never forget. And so when we talk about Cyril Radcliffe, it's easy to focus on a man, the maps, the commissions, the deadlines. But the real story isn't about the line. The real story is about people living on different sides of that line. People who had no seat at the table, no voice in discussion, yet carried its consequences for generations. And so, even today, nearly 80 years later, many families still remember the village they left behind, the street they grew up on, the home they left behind. Because borders can divide lands, but memories rarely stay within borders. And yet, even Radcliffe's line wasn't the first goodbye. For many families, the first and the hardest goodbye happened somewhere else. On crowded railway platforms, inside packed trains, in journeys filled with uncertainty, heartbreak, fear, and panic. And that is where our next episode begins. If your family was affected by the partition in 1947, what is one place, home, or story that still lives in your family's memory today? Share your family story in the comments below and stay tuned for episode 3.